All right, so today we're diving into some pretty dramatic stuff, honestly. It's like something out of a space opera you'd see in the movies. But it's all real. This is happening right now.
Yes.
You sent in some fascinating sources about it, and we're going to try to unpack this whole situation together. So, what we're talking about is a rescue mission in space, which is already pretty cool, but here's the twist. SpaceX is launching a mission to rescue Boeing astronauts.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty ironic when you think about it. You've got these two, you know, major players in the space industry, SpaceX and Boeing, and they're both working with NASA, of course, to get crews to the ISS, the International Space Station. But there's definitely like this sense of competition between them, even though they're supposed to be,
Yeah,
collaborating.
right. Exactly. And the sources you sent really get into the details, like all the twists and turns of this whole thing. We've got a launch that was scrubbed just minutes before liftoff, astronauts stuck on the ISS way longer than planned. And there's even some political drama swirling around it all.
Oh, yeah. You can't forget about the politics. It's never just about the science, you know. And at the center of all this drama is Boeing's Starliner capsule,
Hmm.
which, let's be honest, it's had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And that's what led to this crazy situation where SpaceX is basically stepping in to rescue their competitors' astronauts.
Yeah, so let's back up a little and set the stage here. The original plan was for SpaceX's Crew-10 mission to launch from Kennedy Space Center back on March 12th, 2025. It was supposed to be a routine crew rotation,
Mm.
pretty standard stuff, with Commander Ann McClain leading the mission, ready to take over from the crew that was already on board the ISS.
Yeah, a typical changing of the guard up there in space.
Yeah.
You'd think it'd be pretty straightforward, right? But that's where things get interesting. Just 45 minutes before liftoff, they had to scrub the launch.
Oh, wow.
There was a last-minute technical issue with one of the Falcon 9 rocket's clamp arms, which caused the delay. And then on top of that, they had high winds, which pushed the next launch window all the way to Friday evening, March 14th.
Man, can you imagine being one of those astronauts? Just all that anticipation and then bam, delay.
I know, right? Must have been a huge disappointment.
For sure. But it's not just an inconvenience, this delay. It has real consequences for the astronauts from Crew 9 who are already up on the ISS, especially two of them who are stuck up there much longer than expected because of this whole mess.
Exactly. And it all goes back to those problems with Boeing's Starliner capsule.
Yeah.
Remember their first piloted test flight last June? They ran into some serious issues, things like propulsion system leaks and thruster malfunctions. It did manage to dock with the ISS eventually, but there were major concerns about its ability to get back to Earth safely.
Oh, wow. So it made it up there, but getting back was the problem.
Right.
So what did NASA do?
Well, they did tons of tests,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
In the end, they decided it was just too risky to bring those astronauts back in the Starliner. So they made the call to keep two of the Crew 9 astronauts, Barry Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, on the ISS way longer than they were supposed to be there.
Oh,
Their
man.
mission was only supposed to be a week,
Yeah.
and it turned into a 288-day marathon.
Wow, that's a big difference. A week turns into almost a year.
Yeah, talk about a change of plans, right?
No kidding. So I'm guessing that caused some controversy leaving those astronauts up there for so long.
Oh, yeah, you better believe it. There was definitely some criticism. Even former President Trump weighed in.
Yeah.
He blamed the Biden administration for leaving them stranded.
Wow.
And then you've got Elon Musk, SpaceX's CEO. He even offered to send a rescue mission sooner. But NASA stuck with their original plan to bring those astronauts back on Crew 9.
Okay, so you've got this whole political drama going on in the background, but I think it's important to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
This whole situation really highlights the rivalry going on within NASA's Commercial Crew program. Can you give us a little background on that?
Sure. So NASA started the Commercial Crew program to basically encourage private companies to, develop their own spacecraft that could transport astronauts to and from the ISS. So you've got companies like SpaceX and Boeing competing for these contracts.
Mhm.
And at first, Boeing was considered the front runner. I mean, they've got this long history in aerospace. They're the big name,
Mm-hmm.
the OG space company. But then SpaceX came along and really shook things up with their innovative approach and their emphasis on reusable rockets.
Yeah, they really changed the
Well, it
game.
did. And now their Crew Dragon capsule has basically become the go-to for U.S. crewed missions to the ISS. It's proven to be way more reliable than the Starliner.
It's almost like a turning point. SpaceX, this relative newcomer stepping in to rescue astronauts who were stranded because of problems with a spacecraft built by, this company that was once the leader in spaceflight. It's
Yeah.
pretty symbolic.
It really is. But despite all the drama, NASA's saying that bringing those astronauts back on Crew 9 was always part of the plan. Steve Stitch, the manager of NASA's Commercial Crew program, confirmed that they actually launched Crew-9 with 2 empty seats, specifically for the Starliner astronauts,
Oh,
just
wow.
in case something like this happened.
Oh, wow. So they were prepared for this.
Yeah, they were.
So if they already had seats reserved for them, why not bring them back on Crew-9 sooner? Why wait?
You got to think about the ISS. It's not just a floating hotel. It's this huge, complex orbiting laboratory. And it takes a certain number of people to keep it running smoothly. Bringing 2 astronauts back early would have left them with a skeleton crew up there, which could have put the whole station at risk.
Right. That makes sense. You don't want to mess with the safety of the ISS.
Exactly.
But let's not forget about the human side of all this. What's it been like for those astronauts who've been stuck up there on the ISS for so long?
I know, it's got to be tough. You can imagine the mental and emotional toll that kind of extended stay would take. But it also shows how incredibly resilient and adaptable astronauts are. They've had to adjust to a situation that none of them could have predicted.
Right.
Sunita Williams, one of the astronauts who's been up there the longest, she described the ISS as a place where things happen. You know, things break down, unexpected stuff comes up.
Yeah.
And you need people to fix it both inside and out. You need a team that can handle anything.
That's a great point. It really shows how important teamwork is in space. You got to be able to rely on each other.
Absolutely.
So what about the astronauts who are on Crew-10 heading up to the ISS to bring their colleagues home? What are they saying about this unique mission?
Well, they're excited, and they also feel a huge sense of responsibility. You know, Anne McLean, the Crew-10 commander, she's said that she's really looking forward to reuniting with the Crew-9 astronauts. She talked about how much she's looking forward to just, breaking bread with them, sharing meal together. It shows that even in the middle of this high-stakes mission, there's still that sense of camaraderie.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that even with all the competition and the drama, there's still this human connection. It's a reminder that at the end of the day, space exploration is all about people working together, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about the rescue mission, the politics, the rivalry between SpaceX and Boeing, and the human side of it all. But I think we need to take a little break, let all this sink in, and then come back and delve deeper into what all of this means for the future of space exploration. What do you say?
Sounds good to me. So, we've talked about this whole situation with Crew-9 and Crew-10, but I think it's worth kind of taking a step back and thinking about what this rescue mission really tells us about the future of space exploration. The big picture.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you've got SpaceX, this relatively young company, basically bailing out Boeing, this giant in the aerospace industry. It makes you wonder what this means for the balance of power in the commercial space race.
Definitely. It feels like we're seeing a real shift happening. The landscape is changing. Private companies are becoming more and more important in space exploration, and they're bringing a whole new energy and a different way of doing things.
It seems like being able to adapt quickly and being willing to take risks is becoming more valuable than just having experience and a big name. And of course, we can't forget about the cost. SpaceX has really shaken things up with their reusable rockets, making spaceflight way more affordable.
Absolutely. That opens up so many possibilities, not just for government missions, but for commercial ventures and maybe even space tourism on a much larger scale.
It's exciting to think about.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder about Boeing's future in all this. They've hit some serious roadblocks with the Starliner. It makes you question if their experience and their legacy are enough to keep up in this new era of spaceflight.
It's a question for sure. I mean, they've had delays, cost overruns, and now all these technical problems. It kind of highlights the potential clash between these traditional aerospace giants with their rigorous testing and long development timelines, and these newer companies like SpaceX, who are more nimble and iterative.
It's like the difference between a really fancy, meticulously crafted Swiss watch and a smartphone that's constantly being updated. Both impressive in their own way, but in a field that's changing as fast as space exploration, the ability to adapt quickly seems pretty crucial.
That's a great way to put it. And it's important to remember that both companies are still working closely with NASA, which has its own goals and limitations.
Right. And speaking of NASA, we mentioned the criticism from former President Trump earlier, but it's clear that the Biden administration is also watching all this closely. The success of NASA's Commercial Crew program is a huge deal for the U.S., in terms of maintaining its leadership in space.
Oh, definitely. It's about national pride, technological advancement, and the strategic importance of space. The U.S. wants to stay ahead of the curve, and private companies are key to that.
But with Boeing struggling, it raises questions about their partnership with NASA. Can they overcome these challenges and get back on track, or will SpaceX just solidify its position as the top dog in crewed spaceflight?
It's hard to say what will happen. The next few years will be crucial in figuring all that out. But one thing's for sure, the competition is intense and the stakes are incredibly high.
It's almost poetic in a way. SpaceX, born out of this desire to push the limits of what's possible in space, is rescuing astronauts who are stranded because of the struggles of a company that basically defined what aerospace is.
It's true. It reminds us that progress isn't always a straight line. And sometimes the most unexpected events can lead to the biggest shifts in perspective.
We've talked a lot about the technology and the politics, but I think it's important to bring it back to the human element here, at the heart of all of this.
Absolutely. Of course. I mean, in the midst of all the technical details and the corporate competition, we can't forget that there are real people who have been living and working in this extraordinary environment of space for months on end.
It takes so much resilience and adaptability to deal with the challenges of long-duration space travel, the isolation, the risks, the unknowns.
And it's not just about coping. It's also about this profound experience of being in space, the incredible views of Earth, the thrill of scientific discovery. It's this unique blend of challenges and rewards.
And as we keep pushing further into space, I think understanding the psychological impact of these long missions is going to become even more important.
Definitely. We have to ensure the well-being of our astronauts, not just for their sake, but for the success of the missions. It requires a more holistic approach that takes into account the human factor as much as the technical aspects.
So we've covered a lot here, from the rescue mission itself to the broader implications for the future of space exploration. But I want to leave our listener with something to think about. What do you think the situation with SpaceX's success and Boeing's ongoing struggles tells us about where space exploration is heading?
That's a great question, and it's a tough one to answer. It seems to suggest that adaptability, innovation, and a willingness to try new approaches are becoming more and more important for success in this field.
It's almost like we're seeing a changing of the guard, a shift from the old ways of doing things to a new generation of innovators who are rewriting the rules.
In a way, yes.
Mm.
But it's also important to remember that space exploration has always been about pushing boundaries, about challenging what we think we know, and about learning from both successes and failures. What we're seeing now is just another chapter in that story.
You mentioned learning from failures, and I think it's worth spending a little more time on that. What lessons can we learn from Boeing's challenges with the Starliner?
Well, one big takeaway is that even the most experienced companies with a long history of success need to be willing to adapt and evolve. The aerospace industry is changing really fast, and those who hold on to the old ways risk being left behind.
That's a really important point. And it applies to so many other fields, too, not just space. In today's world, being able to adapt and innovate is crucial for pretty much any industry.
Exactly. It's about understanding that what worked in the past might not work in the future. It's about being open to new technologies, new approaches, and even new ways of thinking about problems.
So Boeing's struggles with the Starliner are kind of a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the giants can stumble.
Right. But it's also important to remember that setbacks are going to happen, especially when you're trying to do something groundbreaking. It's how you respond to those setbacks that really matters.
Resilience, adaptability, a willingness to learn from mistakes. Those seem to be the keys to success in this new era of space exploration.
For sure. And I think those are important qualities for anyone in any field who's trying to achieve something truly groundbreaking. It's about having the courage to take risks, the humility to learn from your mistakes, and the determination to keep going, even when things get tough.
It's inspiring when you think about the people who are actually living and working in space, facing those challenges head on. What can we learn from their experiences?
I think one of the most profound lessons we can learn from astronauts is the power of human resilience and adaptability. They're trained to handle extreme conditions, to solve problems under pressure, and to work together as a team, even when things go wrong.
It's amazing what the human spirit can achieve.
It really is. Yeah. And it reminds us that even in the face of adversity, we can do incredible things when we work together, use our creativity, and never give up on our goals.
We've talked about the rivalry between SpaceX and Boeing, the technical hurdles of spaceflight, and the human side of all of it. But let's bring it back to our listener for a moment. What do you think is the most important thing for them to take away from all of this?
I think the key takeaway is that we're living in a really exciting time for space exploration. We're seeing a major shift in how we access and use space, and the story is still being written. It's a story of competition and collaboration, innovation, and tradition, risks and rewards. And it reminds us of the incredible potential of human ingenuity and the importance of never giving up on our dreams, no matter how ambitious they might seem.
Those are some powerful thoughts. And as we head into the final part of our deep dive, I want to explore another aspect of this whole thing, this kind of unspoken rivalry between Elon Musk and Boeing and the different personalities of these two major players in the space race. It's something that came up in the sources you sent, and I think it adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of how different leadership styles and company cultures can shape innovation and progress.
Okay, so we've got SpaceX rescuing Boeing's astronauts, right? But then there's this whole other thing going on, like this clash of personalities between Elon Musk, the guy behind SpaceX, and the way more traditional corporate culture over at Boeing. What do you think about that dynamic?
Oh, it's definitely a stark contrast. Musk is like this, bold visionary, always challenging the way things are done, always
Hmm.
pushing the limits. And then you've got Boeing, this company with a long history known for its careful engineering and, a much more cautious approach.
Right. Yeah, and it makes you think about how different leadership styles can really affect how fast and in what direction innovation happens. I mean, Musk seems like he can't wait to get to Mars, while Boeing is probably more focused on taking things slowly, step by step.
Exactly. And that difference in how they think about things shows up in their company cultures too. SpaceX has that startup energy, that sense of urgency. They're willing to try things out and make changes quickly. Boeing, being this well-established company, they might be more afraid of risks, more focused on sticking with what they know works.
It makes you wonder if those different approaches contributed to this whole situation. Did SpaceX's agility help them develop a more reliable spacecraft, while Boeing's more traditional methods led to those delays and problems?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely possible. I mean, look at SpaceX's focus on reusable rockets.
Yeah.
That was a huge change, and it's really brought down the cost of space travel. It was a gamble, but it paid off big time.
Yeah.
Boeing seems to have been more hesitant about adopting that kind of technology.
It's a good lesson, I think. Not just for space, but for any industry that's changing quickly. Sometimes you have to be bold, shake things up, take some risks if you want to stay ahead of the game.
I agree. But it's important to remember that there's no magic formula for innovation. What works for one company might not work for another.
Hmm.
And sometimes a more careful step-by-step approach can be just as effective, especially when you're dealing with complex and potentially dangerous technology.
Right. It's about finding that balance between pushing the limits and making sure things are safe and reliable. But let's get back to the human side of things for a minute. You mentioned the camaraderie between the astronauts on the ISS, even though they're from different countries and companies. What's it actually like to live and work in that environment, especially for so long?
It's hard to even imagine being in a small space orbiting Earth at thousands of miles per hour for months and months.
Yeah.
It must take incredible resilience and adaptability to handle that.
I read somewhere that astronauts often talk about this feeling of awe and wonder when they look back at Earth from space. Like it makes them realize how fragile our planet is and how connected everything is.
Yeah, a lot of astronauts experience that. It's called the overview effect. It's like this shift in awareness. They see Earth as one whole interconnected system, and it often makes them feel a deep responsibility to protect our planet.
That's a powerful idea. And it makes me think about the bigger meaning of space exploration. It's not just about technological achievements or national pride. It's about expanding our knowledge of the universe and understanding where we fit in.
Absolutely. And it's about inspiring the next generation to dream big, to push the boundaries of what we think is possible. Space exploration has this amazing ability to capture our imagination, to make us curious and fill us with wonder. It reminds us that there's so much out there still to discover, so much to learn.
It reminds us that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important thing for our listener to take away from all this?
I think the key takeaway is this. We're at a really crucial point in space exploration. Right now, we're seeing a change in how we access space and use it. Private companies are becoming more and more important. It's a time of huge opportunity and big challenges, and it's a story that's still being written.
It's a story that we're all a part of in a way. Whether we're scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, or just curious people listening in, we're all contributing to this incredible human journey of exploring the cosmos.
And it's a journey that demands we think big, that we're bold, that we embrace new ideas, and that we never lose sight of the wonder and inspiration that space exploration can bring.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us and sharing your thoughts.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listener, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking up at the stars. There's a whole universe out there waiting to be discovered.